What does it take to make an interesting podcast that's going to last more than 250 episodes? Well, the answer to that is preparation. And today I'm joined by James Keys. He is the co-host of the insightful podcast called Call It Like I See It, where he and Tunde Angulana delve into complex current issues. And I'm probably going to mess up Tunde's name there because it's just not a thing that comes out of my mouth well. But nonetheless, we're going to hear about their ritual for preparation and how it's been a recipe for success. Stay tuned. So James, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it. So you mentioned, like in a pre-call on this, that you started the podcast after you'd been on Rob Richardson's podcast. He was on our last episode. Nice. What was your vision when you guys said, "Hey, let's talk into a microphone and talk about issues"? I mean, what? How did that start?
Well, it started organically, like many things do. But what we did when we were on Rob's show, it would be maybe 3 or 4 of us, maybe 5 sometimes on the same show. And we try to talk about current events, things that were interesting, that caught the attention of Rob or any of us as far as the guests on the show. And what Tunde and I realized was that with 4 or 5 people on the show, you got like maybe a 45-second snippet, a minute snippet, and you had to say something that was impactful in that. And you had to pack it all in. And you packaged it, you delivered it, and that was that. And you might not say anything for another 5, 6, 7 minutes after that. And so, not that would be a problem necessarily to be able to deliver some kind of impactful message, but it did not give you much of a chance to unpack what it is you were saying, why you were saying it, the context behind what you're saying. And so it was you say something, then somebody else says something, and somebody else says something, and then like by the time you get 3 or 4 steps down that path, you might be talking about something completely different. And so the why never really came up. And it wasn't a function of a deficiency in the show. It was just the nature of the format. And so with Tunde and I, we would have conversations on the telephone and just talking about stuff. And it was like, you know what? It would be good to be able to have, that's a great offering, like that quick hit there. You see that a lot in media, but it'd be good to also have an option where you can kind of say what you mean and why you mean it and so forth, or why you think that, or the historical context that might be based on. And so that was really the idea that the show developed around. And so that's why it's mainly just me and him. Sometimes we have an extra guest and, do something like that. But primarily it'll be me and him. And we pick a topic and we'll just go back and forth on it and try to really give something that will give you some context or some grounding in terms of why we see it the way we see it, or what we're seeing from there that may not be something that jumps out to someone immediately.
And it's all interesting. And you guys have done this for 250 plus episods, because we just edited, what was it, 254 last week or 255, something like that. With that, I know you guys started this as a way just to talk to each other about issues and throw it out into the ether and be like, hey, hopefully someone watches this. As you've gathered an audience, how has that vision of what you guys do changed?
Well, it hasn't changed much. I'd say the format is more so guided by the media in which you participate in. And so for us, we were audio only for a very long time, and so we only started doing video, like live videos, maybe in October, November of 2023. So as an audio only, we would have longer segments and go in more depth on issues. We do books sometimes. Sometimes we talk about just what's happening in the news, or there's science topics that interest us, or there's, whatever. Whatever is something that piques our interest, that's something that's impactful in some way in human society and the world we live in. And so with the audio format, we were doing, we'd have a 40-minute segment or a 45-minute segment, and then maybe a 10-minute hit at the end. But with the video, what we've trended towards more was maybe have maybe 3 15 to 30-minute segments, and where we break it up a little bit more. We still try to go in depth on what we talk about, but we may look at, instead of looking at a topic from 3 angles, we might only look at that topic from 2 angles and go in depth on those 2 angles. But that's really dictated more because at its core, the reason why our show exists is because these are all conversations that Tunde and I could or would or have had on the telephone, just talking. And so it's like, okay, well, yeah, let me shave, let me, stand sit in front of a camera and we can have it like that. But otherwise, I'll be sitting on my iPads or iPods doing the dishes and talking to them, and it'll be the same thing that we're doing there. With the one caveat being that we are able to, when it's just the two of us, there's more shorthand. It's just like I can say something and say, I don't have to say, okay, well, the reason that, back in 1840, the U.S. had this issue with, and then I don't have to give necessarily that background because he knows when I reference something what I'm talking about by and large.
To me, that's a big part of it. And what I loved is you said you want to talk about some of the stuff in the news. Mm-hmm. And what's going on, which there's some pitfalls there that we'll get into later. Mm-hmm. But with that, you guys don't just talk about what's on the news, because the news is a 10 or 15 second snippet in most cases that they're saying, hey, be afraid of this. And then you guys...
Well, no, there's first pay attention to this, then be afraid. Right. Or one or the other. Pay attention and be afraid. Those are the two.
Pay attention, be afraid, be more afraid, stay afraid. Yes. Those are the things that... But what I always find so interesting is that so many people talk about what they hear about on the news. Mm-hmm. You guys take what the news says and then you go down the rabbit holes. Mm-hmm. In many cases, these are topics that are, recent, and yet you're like, look, we're going to talk about this. The Supreme Court made a decision on X, Y, and Z the other day. We're going to talk about it this week. Mm-hmm. And then here you are reciting articles that you've read about this. You're reciting court cases that have been involved with this. Obviously, you're a patent attorney, mm-hmm. so court's kind of your thing. Mm-hmm. You know where to find the information, but you still have to do the prep and get the information. What goes into the prep for this? How do you guys set that up to say, look, this is what we're preparing for? Mm-hmm.
Well, that's an excellent question. So what we do, it's similar to what I was referencing previously. It's all based on our conversations. And so we will, whether it be, we'll start, maybe we're texting about something or we're talking about something. It'll be like, oh yeah, and that's kind of like this, when this happened. And, one of the things that came up this past week when we were looking at all the stuff that was going on with Biden and age and so forth was like, there's information out there about FDR when FDR was running and had to hide his partial paralysis. And, and why would he do that? Why did he do that? What did he know about how the public would perceive? Because, he was still mentally sharp. And so in the course of our conversations, connections will pop up and say, oh, that's kind of like this, or this, this is something that resembles a historical occurrence or something like that, or something that is maybe deeply embedded in kind of our human nature that we're all reacting to. And let's actually have that conversation out loud instead of just kind of, oh yeah, some people know that there's a human element involved in this, and other people think this is kind of the first time this has ever happened, and nothing like this we've ever seen before. And so it's through those conversations, and then from those conversations we can then dig deep and say, okay, well, yeah, I do remember something about that. Let me go, find some information about that, just so I can speak on it a little more clearly and speak on it with a little more authority. Because I'm not going off of distant recollection. I'm going off of, okay, yeah, I had the distant recollection, and then I went and looked at it. And so that's the nature of the preparation, is just because, again, it's not to rehash what we already have just seen and what we've already observed, but it's to try to connect it and ground it in some kind of context, because a lot of things that we experience and what we see are things that are similar to past fights that have gone on in history, or things that the saying being the history rhymes. It doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it rhymes. And so it's something that if we tap into, I think that we can get a better handle on some of the issues that we face and actually be able to try to address them, because there old people used to say there's nothing new under the sun, and so we can tap into some of that and battles that have been fought before, or solutions that have been come up with before, and try to leverage that to our own benefit.
That quote of history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes is amazing.
Yeah.
And when you guys, there's been times where I've been going through and editing your podcast, and you'll talk about something that's going on, and you'll make a reference to something that has happened in history that maybe I possibly slept through in 8th grade history, that you guys recall and pull out and have details on and information on that's just, unbelievable. With that, as you've done your prep and your research on stuff, what has been one or two like big surprises where you're like, oh, that's different?
Well, I would say the biggest surprise that we see, when we go back and do our research, is how closely things can align and really be. It's like it's almost like things that were planned in a certain way, and it's like, well, wow, how can when you go back and look at some of the fights that we've had recently, whether it be January 6th, and then you look at and I say fights, in the sense that just arguments
Right.
and people, disputes, people being adverse to one another. And then you look at some of the same things that happen maybe, at around the turn of the 20th century, turning into the 20th century, around 1900, or before that. And when you saw, like, people being upset about what happened in elections, and then doing something kinetic about it, and it's in the United States, and it's like, oh wow, that's similar. It may even be worse than what we just saw here with January 6th. And so again, you can have that conversation. Like, there's plenty of space for the judgment of it and saying, oh, well, this is wrong, and this is so bad, and everything like that. And that's great. And I'm not saying we don't give our opinion on things like that, but I think also there's a lot to be gained from actually saying, okay, has something like this happened before? And then to see how closely some of these things just mirror themselves or mirror things that are happening currently is just amazing. Again, it's almost like somebody drew a story, or wrote a story and say, hey, we're going to have this, and then it's going to happen like this again, and it's going to be 98% parallel. And it's like, wow, like and it shows you kind of the humanity of it as well, because a lot of times when we have these conversations and we're in the moment, we're a prisoner of the moment, the humanity of people we may not agree with, it gets lost, because what you see is them as an obstacle, or them as somebody that is trying to undermine you or undermine something you care about, and the humanity of it being that this is kind of in a respect the way that some people react to certain things. Then the larger context can help you with that. Not to say, okay, we should just let people do what they want to do, but maybe there are ways to address it. Maybe, hey, how did people address this in the past? And we're able to move forward and so forth.
It is interesting, because with that, the connections that you guys make, I'm assuming you're a bit of a history buff also. Is that a decent assumption?
I'd say I don't know if I could say I was a history buff. I'm interested in it, and because I'm sure there's many people who would consider themselves history buffs that know a lot more than I do. Probably, I'd say between the two of us, we recall a lot. Like we have pretty good memories in that sense, and then. The show wouldn't have as good of a connection to history if it was just me, or if it was just Tunde. But when we get talking, and again, this is a lot of pre-show stuff that we probably would be doing anyway, then it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of like this. And so he'll say something that might jog my memory, or I'll say something that might jog his memory. And then we'll say, oh, let's dig into this a little bit. Let's get that, and let's make that connection. And so some of it is just our interaction and kind of egging each other on, or causing one to recall something, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I remember reading something about that. And then some of it's that, and then some of it is we're both well read. We both enjoy reading and learning about history, about lots of different things, and so that helps us out a lot. And I'd even say, like, because the show, we make it a point also to not only talk about what's in the news, because the news wants you to feel like that the news is all that's going on, but there's a lot of interesting stuff that goes on all the time. We looked at, like recently we've looked at the recent studies coming out about how alcohol, and they're refuting the notion that a little bit of alcohol is good for you. And so we reacted to that. We've looked at quantum physics, to do 10, 15 minutes on quantum physics and what is happening there currently, or the James Webb Telescope. So there's a lot that's going on, and the thing about our current time is that because there's so much going on, and because we have access to all of this stuff, it's easy to kind of get into a mindset or a mode where you're only looking at, because there's so much, but you're only looking right here. And so, but that may not be the most balanced way to live from a stress standpoint, from just a day-to-day living standpoint.
Balance, what's that, right? It's funny, because the other thing that I see that you guys do incredibly well is you come at subjects, you both take different paths to get, and it's interesting. You don't typically come up with the same answer. Yeah. You guys typically come up with answers that are 2 to 3 degrees off from each other. Mm-hmm. Maybe sometimes 8 to 10 degrees off from each other. Mm-hmm. And you get there totally different ways. Mm-hmm. Is that natural? Is that just the interaction between you and Tunde, or is there some planning that goes involved with that?
No, that's 100% authentic. That is, we actually make it a point to not necessarily say what we're going to say in the show, because there's value, I think, in we've seen this, this kind of alchemy happen where he'll say something, I won't know it's coming, but it'll stimulate me in a certain way. And I'm like, oh, and then I'll have a response for it. Or then vice versa. I'll say something and then he'll have a response for it. And then a lot of times that's some of our best content, we feel like, at least. Like some of the most insightful things would be something that struck one of us when the other one said something. And then we go down that rabbit hole, so to speak, for, we spend 6 or 7 minutes talking about something that was completely unplanned, and so that, like, we know what we want to answer, but neither of us know what the other person is going to say necessarily. And the similarities, or the how we're close, but we're not necessarily aligned, is actually the way our personalities are. So I look at things a certain way, he looks at things a certain way. By and large, it's a similar worldview, in terms of kind of an egalitarian. Let's try to create a system that works, and then we all operate in this system. And if you work hard, you'll get more out of the system. If you don't, maybe the system doesn't kick you to the curb, but it kind of leaves you, you're just not going to get as great of an outcome of somebody who works harder than you, So it's sharing a similar worldview is one thing, but also being able to work our own way through the nuance and, what's actually going on the ground and what has happened, what have we learned, allows us to authentically be ourselves and not necessarily come to the same, walk from different paths to the same point, but as you point out, walk from different paths to a place that's not too far apart, but that is also that is distinct.
Yeah, you guys can definitely see each other from where you're standing, but it's not, you're not, the both of you are such a great mix. And what I also like about it too, is because the personalities kind of mesh. Tunde's a bit more stoic. You're a bit more excited. Occasionally I will watch him just pull the pin and toss, just to see what happens. And it's always entertaining. With that, you guys, part of your goal with this is to educate. It's to spark those critical thinking and conversations with people. What's been like an impactful response you've ever received out of that?
Well, it's been some of the kind of truisms that we throw in from time to time. One of the ones that we know caught a lot of ears was when we talked about conspiracy theories, and we were talking about how the people who are into conspiracy theories, and this is not something we came up with, but it's just something that really needs to be emphasized a lot, is that, when you're looking at conspiracy theories, you can't apply such a strict scrutiny or such strict scrutiny to the official story and then so little scrutiny to whatever alternative story that you have. Be equally skeptical of hey, I'm all fine for question everything. I'm fine with that, but don't question just what the official story is, or just what the people who you don't like are saying. Question what everybody's saying, and then come up with what you can still come in and say, hey, well, I'm not buying into this, but then don't buy into something that makes even less sense, so again, because I'm not here to tell people what to think, but it's like, well, just again, whatever scrutiny you're applying to what you're skeptical of, just make sure that if you really want to find truth and not just emotional satisfaction, then apply that same level of scrutiny across the board. And Tunde talks about his journey, for example, looking at 9/11, and how he had to go through that journey where it was like something about the official thing didn't sit with him. And so he went real deep on some of the unofficial stuff. And then he came to the realization, like, well, hold up, I can see just as many holes in this stuff as I was saying I had in the other. So I can't, just because I want an alternative, just kind of leap into the arms of whatever lover pops up next. I gotta let me have a little bit of let me be discerning across the board. Like my girlfriend left me. That doesn't necessarily mean I jump right to the next girlfriend. That's just like, okay, well, now let me see what else is out there, so to speak. So that's something that we got a very positive response from that, and particularly we saw like with some young people, which was good, because that when you're young, a lot of times is when, well, no, I shouldn't say a lot. I shouldn't say this as an exclusive thing, but you see that a lot where the official stories that the old people are telling are like, these old people are just, they're in the tank for something. So just make sure that, you look at everybody with the same scrutiny. Because nobody wants to be a sucker, you know.
No. Speaking of which, one thing that I've always been curious about with you guys, you want to make an impact with this. You guys, and I know you guys have made an impact with it, but how do you measure that impact? And it could be comments, it could be likes, it could be shares, it could be you just walking out of the room smiling, saying, "Hell yeah, we killed this one." What's your measure of impact on this?
Well, I'd say this: we stay true to the idea that we do the show because we like to do the show, and we want to positively contribute to the dialogue in society. And so that's what we judge ourselves on more than anything. Like, it's great to get likes, it's great to get comments. What I appreciate always a lot is, people saying, "Oh yeah, I was listening to the show. I was talking to a buddy of mine just this weekend, and he was like, yeah. When you were, on the one show when you said this, I was like, oh man, I hadn't thought about that." And that's always nice to hear. Someone that I hadn't spoken to the guy for 6 months, and so, but to hear that he had listened to my show, 2 weeks ago, something like that was kind of cool, and that he got something from it. But nonetheless, it's kind of like a moral compass thing. Like, if we were like, there are ways we could try to be more impactful or try to reach more people and so forth. But a large part of what we're trying to do, though, is because honesty and authenticity is a big part of what we're doing. And again, this is kind of like the kinds of conversations we would be having anyway, and sharing that basically for posterity. We want something our kids would be proud of if they, pops on YouTube in 10 years or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah. My dad was out here saying something that he believed in and so forth.
Yeah.
And so that's really what we judge ourselves. Like, whether, when we listen to the show and we're trying to, get it ready for prime time, so to speak, it's like, okay, are we being fair? Are we being honest? And, is this something that we're proud of? And so, and yes, like you see the likes, you see the comments and things like that. But again, we don't, if we would be concerned with centering that too much, because the pitfalls of attention, and particularly in the setup that we live in right now, as far as social media, with the way the algorithms instantly reward certain types of attention and so forth, we would be concerned would change the show, would have us doing things that would be more impactful or gather more attention, and not necessarily have the same level of depth.
If with that, what advice, like if someone wants to start something out that's going to be a discussion podcast, especially one that's going to be meant to make people aware of things going on, because to me, that's kind of the simplest way to put what you guys do. It's raising awareness. What would be your advice to them?
Well, the first thing is to make sure that you care. You care not just about what you are seeing, but you care about trying to express what it is that you have in your mind, or what it is, if you're going to have a discussion and so forth, that you really care, because that authenticity does come through. And so that's for one reason. The second reason is that to do something and to do it consistently is, like, we've done weekly, for 250 plus weeks at this point. Every week we've released for that long. And that's a lot. And so there's always things coming up, and, you got to sometimes.
A lot is putting that mildly.
Well, but you can always, like, we do books from time to time as well. So we can do a book and we can record it and then actually have it ready to go. Like, hey, we're going to be out for 2 weeks, so we'll maybe break a book into 2 parts, or do a movie. Sometimes we do movies and so forth. And so we're not always reacting to whatever happened in the week before. So that gives us some leeway, but that you really care about what you're going to talk about, and you're really interested in it, because one, like, that'll come through in terms of the passion, in terms of the depth that you're willing to go through on it, or go into on it. And then also just being able to do it over and over and over and over again. And so, so it's internal. You have to look inside, I think, first, before you do something like this, if you want to do it and do it consistently, because it's going to, you're bringing out something that's inside of you. And so you look inside, well, what do I want to get out? What's important to me to get out? What do I feel strongly about? Or what do I feel like I can add to a discussion about this or about that? And what I would like to add to a discussion about this or about that.
I love that. Really that passion is a huge part of it. I mean,
you got to lean into and this is across the board. This is, if I give my kids this advice, like, figure out what you like, and then lean into the stuff you like. That's, you can't let everything else go. You got to bring everything else with it. But something you have to decide to put a lot of energy into. So that decision can be made for you if you don't think about this. But if you think about it, okay, like, yeah, I want to put a lot of energy into, or I enjoy this, so let me put a lot of energy into this. And that could be something that you put a lot of energy into. But, just in life in general, you have to put a lot of energy into something, more or less.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. A lot of the podcasts that we work with and podcasters we work with, it's not a marketing podcast, but it's in many ways a marketing tool. Mm-hmm. This isn't for you guys.
Yes.
So how do you balance your commitment to these sometimes discussions that may irritate some people? That might be the polite way to put it. With your professional responsibilities. I mean, as like for you, for instance, as a patent attorney.
Yes. Well, one thing we have an advantage, both of us individually, is both of us have our own businesses. So I'm an intellectual property attorney, a patent attorney, patents, trademarks, and so forth. And I have the Keys Law Firm, and that's mine. And so I do my work, and I have, my business is primarily based on, people either have heard of me or meeting from other attorneys or other of my clients, and they come my way and so forth. Tunde has a wealth management business, and it's his business, and he, brings in clients from all over, and has a nice referral setup as well. And so, because if we were working for someone else, that would be a harder balance to strike, because then you're speaking not only for yourself, but you're also speaking as someone who is employed somewhere and so forth. So that is one built-in advantage that we have. The other thing, though, is really it comes back to the honesty of it. Is you'll see we will say. I mean, the podcast is called "Call It Like I See It," and so we'll say what we think. We're not going to sugarcoat things, but if you give it more than 5 minutes, you'll see we're not trying to. There's no hidden agendas. We're not trying to stick it to somebody or something like that. Like if we're going to talk about a controversial topic, or we talk about Donald Trump or something like that, our goal isn't to bash Donald Trump or whatever. It's to kind of look at it from different angles. Now we may be critical in some ways, but in other ways it might be like, yeah, well, what they're doing there is something that's effective, and we might think it's not a great thing to do, but it's not that. Again, it's not there to bag on the guy necessarily. It's to kind of look at it. And from the standpoint of, okay, well, what's happening here? Is there a historical context to what's happening here? Is there some type of human bias or human kind of humanity, something about humanity that's being tapped into here? Something that we shouldn't dismiss as, oh, this is tricks and games and all that. But no, you're tapping into something in the humanity. That's interesting to kind of see that happening in real time. So I think that it's possible. Now, there are some people that if you don't say what it is that they want to hear, they'll just be mad. And so, but that's not necessarily the audience that we would be cultivating anyway, because again, we're trying to look at things. And if you're looking to say, okay, I only want to listen to the shows where they, pat the guys I like on the back, or say mean things about the ones that the people that I don't like, you won't stick around for our podcast really anyway, because it's like, we're trying to look a little deeper than that, and pull out things that again are interesting that we can learn from, that we can find context in.
It's funny you say that, because the name is Call It Like I See It, which so many people would inference it's a first glance. But the vision that you guys have into so many of these topics and subjects is Superman vision-like, because you're not just calling it, at a first glance, you're calling it like you see it after a solid couple of hours of research on it, conversing on it, looking at different sources on it. And to me, it's to be honest, it's one of the reasons why I love when we get to edit it, because to me, it's that deeper understanding of things. It's pushing beyond. It's not the surface level BS that has been dished out so many times that so many people are seeing all the time that just doesn't matter. And that's why I love it. And that's why I so am glad to see this continue on into the future.
Well, thank you very much.
The one big question for the end here is, how has this doing the podcast enhanced your understanding of like the world and how it works?
Well, that's an excellent question, because that is part of I would say this, Tunde and I each consider this like a hobby, right? And sure. So in the same way that you consider reading a hobby, or something like reading books, like not TikTok, but like it's like actually reading, sitting down and reading something. And so part of it is a journey of self-discovery and further understanding of things. Like we like learning about stuff. And so it gives us an excuse. It gives us some structure to that. Like each week, but each of us talk about how, oh yeah, I now have a greater grasp on something I might have had let's say a 50% grasp on. Now I have an 80% grasp on it because I took some time to read about it a little bit more, which I enjoyed reading about it some more. I enjoyed learning some more about it and learning some more interesting facts about it. And so that is a big part of what we're doing. Is it's not just taking the audience on a journey, it's taking ourselves on a journey of learning more and connecting more dots and seeing things a little more deeply, and so it's very enjoyable from that sense. I feel like it's making me a more of the person that I want to be anyway. And that's how you get to doing it 250 plus times is, you're getting more out of it than, hey, how many likes did we get? Or, how many subs do we have and things like that. Like, I don't know if it's not something we're trying to necessarily make a ton of money on. It's like, hey, I want to do this. Right. I want to learn more. Now, if that stuff, happens, then we'll cross those bridges, as they come. But it's just more of a matter of, continued self-development. And you read about stuff and then you talk about stuff and you try to have a deeper understanding.
That to me is a wonderful statement. And that seems like a good place to leave it. Where can people find Call It Like I See It?
The podcast is available on all major podcast platforms. And also we have our YouTube page as well, where we have video posted every week. And then we have audio posted every week. It's once a week show. The videos are broken up into, again, 30 to 15 minute segments based on topic generally. And then, the audio is one hit. And then actually for the treat for the listeners, the audio will come out a little bit before the video. So, you get to if you want it early, you can get it a little earlier. We come out, audio comes out Tuesday, and towards the end of the day, video comes out on Wednesday.
Nice, very nice. First off, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, and for the kind words as well.
No, this well earned. This has been an absolute blast. For those of you out there that have watched this, to me, the things that I always like, the learning in this, and obviously that is a huge part of what James loves too, is it's that constant process of learning. Anytime I sit down here and I get to talk to someone new, I always find a way to learn something, a way to take something away from it. To me, the prep that goes into this comes from another P word. It comes from the passion. And those two things are a big key for making sure that your podcast is going to take off. Keep those things in mind as you move forward. Also, make sure that you take care of yourself, and if you can, take care of someone else too. We will see you soon.